Do you view Father Elija from Fallout New Vegas' Dead Money DLC as something of a role model? Do you unironically believe the US Civil War was entirely about state secession rights and had nothing to do with slavery? Or perhaps you're just the sort of person who likes to do the most morally messed up things you can think of in a video game just to see the looks on your friends' faces when you talk about how different your various playthroughs went. If any of that sounded like you, I have the perfect character for you. How yin's doing? I'm Ian, and this is a Streets of Rogue character guide to the Slave Master.
Women and children! Yeah! We're using a shield!
We would like to buy one child, please!
The Slave Master is unlocked via purchasing 4 slaves across any number of runs. Yes, I said buy. You can do that in this game. You can buy slaves. There was no reason for you to necessarily kill all of those slave masters when you were given missions to rescue various slaves on each floor. Now, as you lament all those hard-working slave masters you needlessly killed, I will now read their backstory. Ahem. The warmest, gentlest slave master one could ever hope to have, joins fellow slave masters each night to serenade their slaves with a cappella lullabies. This is followed by a mandatory cuddle session. As for the form-fitting leather, well, everybody has their thing, okay?
Oh, harder, Daddy! Son?
As for your stats, you have an average of 2 in everything save for firearms, which is an above average of 3. You also have the ideological clash trait, making it so that NPCs will randomly become hostile against you because apparently slavery is, quote, completely unethical and a direct violation of human rights.
People think that because it's true!
Worse still, this trait is completely impossible to remove from your character even if you end up going to an augmentation booth with literally all the money. Trust me, I tried. Thankfully, however, you can augment your other traits at an augmentation booth. These traits are Team Building Expert and Poor Hand-Eye Coordination. Team Building Expert has been covered on several previously covered characters on this channel, but to make it short, it increases the number of followers you can have from 1 to 3. As for Poor Hand-Eye Coordination, this makes it so that you're doing something but it takes longer to fill up, meaning certain activities such as using hacking tools to hack into computers, polluting air vents, or using your special ability will take longer than with characters who don't have this trait. Speaking of your special ability, it is called Enslave. With this ability, you can place bomb collars on stunned NPCs. These NPCs will henceforth obey your orders via the dialogue menu. Normally, you can only have 3 slaves/followers at any given time, but this can be bypassed if you end up enslaving a slave master with 3 slaves, resulting in you having 4 followers instead of the normal cap of 3. However, even if you don't get the chance to use this trick on your various playthroughs of the game, the Enslave special ability is extremely powerful regardless, since you can effectively get 3 followers via tasing different NPCs on the floors and then sending them on suicide missions to deal with neutralization targets, or whatever other missions you end up stuck with on a given floor are.
My men do not even know the meaning of the word surrender.
But we're willing to learn!
Please keep in mind, however, that the slave collars you have on your slaves are explosive. This means upon their death, or if they stray too far away from you, the slave will explode, doing some decent damage to anyone nearby, as well as causing some massive property damage if they happen to be next to a wall when this goes off. There is also a very small chance that your slaves will try to commit mutiny against you and try to fight you for their freedom. If this should occur, don't be afraid to use the remote control in your starting inventory to manually detonate their collars, unless of course you are too close to them to not be caught in the blast radius of the inevitable explosion of said collars going off. You can also use this remote control to have the manual detonations of the collars be used to your advantage in more creative fashions, such as turning your slaves into organic C4 packs, or as suicide bombers, because while slaves will explode upon their death, there are some key factors to this you need to remember. Firstly, NPCs will walk away from those who they just killed, and 2, the slaves don't explode instantly upon their death, there's a few seconds before they go off. Also keep in mind that you only have 3 charges on your remote control, so you can only manually detonate the slave collars 3 times on each floor before you need to use the elevator to recharge them. Also bear in mind that the remote control is very much an all-or-nothing ability. Either all of your slaves explode, or none of them. So if you're going to send your slaves out somewhere with the full intention of using the remote control to detonate them remotely, you might as well have all of them attack at once, instead of just sending them in one at a time. In the event that you end up experiencing a slave revolt where you are unwilling or unable to use your remote control to detonate all of the slave callers, I advise getting creative with new ways of dealing with slaves. While the most obvious solution for your problem would be to go fisticuffs with the rebellious slave, I strongly advise using the other items in your starting inventory to do this, such as the axe. The axe is a pretty great melee weapon for something you can start in the slums with. However, its power starts to fall off once you're halfway through your typical run of this game. The other, far more useful item in your starting inventory is the taser. The taser fires a single shot that has a significant cooldown that will stun foes who are hit by it. While this can be used to stun rebellious slaves so you can run away from them and cause their collars to go off by being too far away from you, the far more common scenario to use this weapon is to have it be used to stun NPCs so you can enslave them in the first place. However, since friends of the individual you're trying to enslave will attack you and try to interrupt the enslavement process, I recommend making sure the NPC you're trying to enslave is either completely alone or that you have some other way of impairing NPCs' movements before you go about enslaving them. A reliable alternative to the taser I have found is the freeze ray, which can also achieve the same effect as the taser for the purposes of enslaving. Just bear in mind that the freeze ray's effects last longer, so you might have to wait around a bit for them to thaw out if you intend for the people you enslave to actually be useful to you whatsoever. One final thing about the taser before we move on to your big quest. It actually has the potential to do some decent damage under right circumstances. Said right circumstances are whenever the individual you're shooting with it is in water whatsoever. Whether they be swimming in a pool or standing in a puddle doesn't matter, so long as they fit one of these conditions and are considered wet in the game's code whatsoever, they will take some decent damage from this weapon. With the basics of your character now covered, let us move on to your big quest. Slave it you, I choose you!
Set me free!
Your big quest is called Catch 'em All. In this quest, you must find and enslave a specific type of NPC which will be listed in the map menu under your big quest. Once you have found and enslaved the appropriate type of NPC, you must then escort them to the nearest elevator, exit, or entrance, does not really matter, where then the enslaved NPC will then enter the elevator and head off to your private collection out of the game world. This will result in the quest being completed for that floor. The difficulty for this quest can vary wildly on each and every floor, since sometimes the NPC you need to enslave will be standing right next to you when you first arrive on a floor, while other times you'll be like searching for a needle in a haystack. I recommend grabbing the GPS trait and teleport happy if you can, as it makes transporting and finding the NPCs you need to enslave much easier. I also strongly recommend ditching the poor hand-eye coordination trait at an augmentation booth the first chance you get. On a similar note, I also strongly advise grabbing the nimble fingers trait if you ever get the opportunity to do so as you level up, since it has the opposite effect of poor hand-eye coordination, and enslaving people faster is always going to be a nice thing to have. The best advice, however, I can give for those of you who are struggling to do this big quest is to simply have as many different types of NPCs enslaved as possible before you move to the next floor. This is because the big quest does not require you to have enslaved NPCs from the floor you're on. They just need to be of the specific class clarified in the map menu. So let's just say, for example, you ended up enslaving a goon on a given floor because they were stopping you from doing a mission objective. If you then carry that goon over to the next floor, and the next NPC you need to enslave to complete your big quest happens to be Goon, the goon that was following you as you progress from the last floor will simply go through the elevator and leave, causing the quest to auto-complete more or less as soon as you arrive. Because of this, I strongly recommend having 3 different NPC types enslaved as you progress between each floor, as this will allow you to maximize the chances of this sort of thing happening, making things far easier for you in the long run. If you manage to complete this quest successfully, once you reach the mayor's village, slavery will be normalized, making it so that NPCs will no longer be annoyed at you for enslaving their next of kin, the bomb collars will do more damage when the slaves self-destruct, and the slaves will finally learn their place and stop trying to mutiny against you altogether. All in all, I give the Slave Master a Pokemon Trainer out of 10. If you want to use the ideological clash trait to turn the world into a bunch of tall grass, allowing you to use your Poke-Slaves to fight wild NPC mons, then the Slave Master is the ideal character for you. That's all for now though. Like the video if you did, subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one. I've been Ian, you have been you, and this has been the Streets of Rogue character guide to the Slave Master. And stay tuned, the werewolf is coming up next. Now, if you'll excuse me, all my slaves and clones just elected me mayor, so I have to go give a speech. Play me out, Myro B!